Welcome to the Off the Charts Football Podcast. I'm Matt Manocherian of Sports Info Solutions, joined as always by Aaron Schatz of Football Outsiders. Aaron, I know you are a big Patriots guy. I got to ask you, what is your take on the Gronk threat to retire in response to the trade?
Fear. Actually, if he retired because he was traded to another team, it wouldn't be any worse than having him traded to another team. I mean, as an NFL fan, it's worse because you want to watch him somewhere. But as a Patriots fan, it's not any worse.
So I think it's smart. And I love that Brady's my QB because basically what he's saying is like, he gets it. He is considered the best tight end of all time. He's been playing with this one guy who's helped him look a certain way. He's really not interested in playing with somebody else. And he's made boatloads of cash with earning potential off the field that's going to go extend beyond his retirement.
Yeah.
Also, his back looks like it hurts.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if part of this is that when the time comes for Brady to retire, if Gronk hasn't retired yet, that Gronk will go at the same time.
Yeah, I think he was pretty clear. He doesn't want to play anywhere else, and I don't think he was just saying that. It seems clear. I think it's a good thing as a Patriots fan, though. You're not losing Gronk. You don't have to worry about losing him a year too soon, as they say.
Yeah, I'm glad that he stood up to the trade. I don't understand. I think that despite the success that the team has had, you can question some of their personnel moves. And I have to admit that I would not understand trading Rob Gronkowski at this point. He is, like you said, peak performance-wise, the best tight end who's ever been. And I just don't think that you can get equal value for that.
He's literally their entire passing game right now.
Right now he is. Now, hopefully that changes, but we'll have to see because, Edelman is 32 years old and he's coming back after not playing for a year and a quarter. And of course, when can you really depend on Josh Gordon for anything?
All right. Well, let's take a quick look back and talk about the games that we talked about last week going in. The first one that we discussed was Green Bay against Washington. And in this case, it was Green Bay and Aaron Rodgers having a really tough time. According to our data, Aaron had -4 expected points added through the air, just a 43% positive play percent. And my real takeaway there is the Washington pass defense is really good. Second in the NFL with 5.4 yards per attempt allowed and a QB rating against of 77. I think it, part injury, but also that's a really good secondary there. And Washington's not a terrible team.
No, Washington is an average to slightly above average team, and they have been for a couple of years now. And that's what I argued in my ESPN Upset Watch piece that sort of suggested that they might win. It's interesting to suggest that it's a really good secondary because they're not really known for anybody in their secondary past Josh Norman, right? You look at the rest of those names. You've got the youngster and Fabian Moreau. You've got Quentin Dunbar, who is an all right player, but that's a guy who transitioned from wide receiver to cornerback in the pros. Swearinger and Nicholson are not that well regarded at safety. What you do have is an excellent defensive line now that you have the two Alabama guys, Allen and Payne. And I think, they were number one in pressure rate last year, and I think they're getting it done with pass pressure.
I think you're right on. Also, you noted some of the players that they have left over. They traded away Kendall Fuller in the offseason, who was one of the top slot corners in the league last year, and they didn't miss a beat.
Right. That's one of the surprises, I think, is that was their second best guy in the secondary, and they traded him away. And yeah, like you said, they're playing very well.
Yeah, it supports what you're saying. I think you got to give some credit to what they're doing up front there and how that's helping on the back end. Next game that we talked about last week was New Orleans and Atlanta. Ended up being a crazy game going to overtime. New Orleans is allowing a quarterback rating against of 142 through 3 games. But Drew Brees, on the other hand, is making up for it with just ridiculous historic numbers. 35 expected points added on passes this year. Second amongst quarterbacks with 23 points earned. Leads the NFL with a 62% positive play percentage. And when targeting Michael Thomas, they have a 75% positive play percentage. Usually you don't even get a completion percentage that high, but that's kind of our expected points added version of success rate. 75% of the time when targeting Michael Thomas, no wonder they keep going back to the well.
Yeah, Michael Thomas has been fantastic this year. The disintegration of the New Orleans defense is interesting. It really does play into what I'm always talking about, which is defense being much harder to predict than offense. But Lattimore has struggled, but what they've really seen struggles is the quarterback position opposite Lattimore, and they benched Ken Crawley in this game for P.J. Williams, and then P.J. Williams wasn't very good either. But then defense isn't really a good thing for Atlanta either. They lost another starting defender in this game in Ricardo Allen. They're now down 3 guys from their starting defense, and this is a defense that hasn't been that good the last couple of years to begin with, because we keep waiting for all the young talent to finally coalesce, and instead the young talent is now all getting hurt.
Yeah, we previewed the Falcons a little bit before week 1, and I would say I think it's officially time to start being nervous about what's going on there. We kind of talked about how they seem to have a lot of talent, but we're seeing some of those injuries on defense, and the underperforming is starting to become a little bit hard to ignore.
Yeah, on offense, the passing game is full speed ahead. The run game has been terrible this year. The running game for Atlanta, I mean, they've been without Freeman, but Coleman in the past had been, a fine substitute. But they're also having offensive line problems. They've lost Levitra for the season, and they're 30th in run DVOA.
All right, let's go from high scoring to low scoring, from New Orleans, Atlanta to Tennessee, Jacksonville. What did you make of that slugfest with our 15 combined points?
So low. What happened to the Blake Bortles offense against the Patriots? I don't know whether that shows that he was just a fluky good game or that the Patriots defense really is that horrible. But Bortles was not good against Tennessee at all, and Tennessee is not known for having a particularly strong defense. Meanwhile, what they're doing at quarterback, I mean, Mariota is hurt. He's kind of trying to make it happen, but he can't make all the throws. They lose Gabbert to the concussion. They brought in, I can't remember who they brought in this week as the third quarterback. They have a third quarterback now, but it's not anybody you want to put in. I'm sort of forgetting who they signed.
Yeah, let me pull it up. I'm looking right now.
Austin Davis.
Oh, right.
Do you really want Austin Davis in there? I don't think so. So, yeah, the Titans, and yet the Titans are 2-1. And DVOA wise, they are the worst of the 2-1 teams. They're 24th in DVOA. They're 28th on offense, which you can imagine given the quarterback injuries. They're basically average on defense, good special teams. They're kind of doing it with mirrors now. I wouldn't feel too good about Tennessee going forward given the quarterback situation.
Yeah, these are two teams that are just the exact opposite of what we're always talking about with Green Bay and Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers is incredible, and he's on a terrible football team besides him. And these are two teams that are really good, that really struggle at that position. Tennessee has had the injuries to contend with this year, but neither of these quarterbacks has been good since they came into the league. There's been upside, sure, but neither has really played that well. And it was another example of teams. We're looking around and seeing 4 of the rookies already starting around the league and getting, really exciting results. And we're looking at these teams kind of sticking to their guns at the quarterback position. And I'm really talking about Jacksonville, if you can't tell. And it sort of makes you wonder if these guys missed a big opportunity to bring in a signal caller.
And then at the same time, the fact is Bortles was average last year, and there was the hopefulness of that Patriots game. So I can see why they're constantly hanging on to the hope there. With Mariota, I mean, we all expected a rebound this year, I think, from last year's down season. But if his health isn't good, there isn't going to be a rebound.
So why is it that I get what you're saying, Bortles showed a glimmer of hope, but why is it that Jacksonville won't bring in a real challenger behind him and have some competition like you'd want at every other position on the football field? And instead, it's like you coddle the guy into playing better. I don't see how that's like a really thorough strategy.
I'm not sure what kind of competition they would really bring in. Like, who was a free agent who is going to be a competitive with their? Obviously, there's one name on everybody's mind, but okay, let's forget about Colin Kaepernick for the moment. Could they have brought in Case Keenum? I mean, if you're Case Keenum, do you want to go somewhere where you know you're going to start, or do you want to go somewhere where you're going to be there to try to poke the starter and get him to play better. I mean, you want to go somewhere where you have a starting job. So I don't know what free agent wants to sign with Jacksonville in order to be the competition for Blake Bortles. And so then it becomes,
I'm not even going to go there with the K word, by the way. I'm not even going to mention the K word.
Do you want to use a first round pick? Or do you want to use a first-round pick on a player that'll help improve the team around Bortles? And I understand the reason to want to do the second rather than the first. But, I mean, again, I think Jacksonville is going to be in the position where they're going to want to take a quarterback in next year's draft.
I think that's exactly where they're going to see themselves. And on that topic of bringing in the rookie and that option of kind of the way to bring in competition, that'll take us into our first big game going into this next week. But before that, I'll do a quick read for the SIS Data Hub. The Off the Charts Football Podcast is brought to you by the Sports Info Solutions Data Hub, located at sisdatahub.com. The SIS Data Hub is an interactive tool that allows you to tap into the vast Sports Info Solutions database to find answers to almost any question imaginable. Want to know which quarterback performs the strongest in 11 personnel against man coverage while under pressure in the fourth quarter of a one-possession game? Answers are just a few clicks away at sisdatahub.com. The SIS Data Hub is also the only place to view exclusive proprietary statistics like points added, positive play percentage, and independent quarterback rating. By combining this with the ability for the user to add an unlimited number of filters based on SIS charting data, the Data Hub is a trusted tool for coaches, scouts, and the media, and it could be yours too. Right now, for a limited time, you can get a free 1-week trial to this revolutionary database when you go to sisdatahub.com and register for an account. That's sisdatahub.com. All right, coming right back in, as I mentioned before the break, the first big game of the week, according to playoff odds. Can you lead us? What is that, Aaron?
Yes, the biggest game of the week, according to playoff odds, is the game that's always big and always a slugfest, Baltimore at Pittsburgh. Baltimore in the playoffs, 70% of the time with a win, only 43% with a loss. Pittsburgh is in 60% of the time with a win, 33% with a loss.
So huge 27% swings for both of the teams based on this game. And I look at Big Ben being at home as being the real storyline here. Negative 16 points added on the road last year, much better at home. I'm counting on him combined with the continued absence of our favorite corner, Jimmy Smith, to help propel Pittsburgh in this one. What are your thoughts overall on this one?
Well, the interesting thing is this may not be the slobber knocker that we're used to from Baltimore-Pittsburgh, because on the flip of this, the Baltimore passing offense has been much better this year than in past years. Baltimore is currently 11th in passing DVOA. Some of that is maybe Flacco is playing a little bit better. We were talking about whether Bortles needs competition to poke him. Well, I mean, Flacco kind of got competition to poke him, and he's playing a little bit better. But obviously, he has much better receivers this year. And so he's throwing the ball downfield a bit more. But then Pittsburgh also has had all kinds of defensive problems and problems in the secondary. It's interesting. Artie Burns had a reasonable success rate in yards allowed per pass last year. He has been a big problem through 3 games of this year, but it's not like he's been awful since he came into the league. He was reasonable last year.
So let me pick up on one of those points you just made there, because I think you figured out exactly where I was going. And on that QB competition note, we wanted to see Lamar. He's the only of the first-round quarterbacks that we haven't seen yet this year. But Joe Flacco started the season really well, as you alluded to. Right now, he's 13th in IQR. He's 8th in points earned amongst quarterbacks. And it makes me think back to last year. We saw Alex Smith have a very inspired season with Patrick Mahomes kind of coming up behind him. In both cases, these guys were middling quarterbacks-ish, and they drafted somebody, and they saw a really talented rookie behind them, and they started playing a little bit better. Now, I'm not saying that I think Flacco's necessarily going to continue that the whole year. I think Alex Smith at this point in his career is a better player than Joe Flacco overall. But that said, we're seeing this pattern recur, and I wonder if Tennessee and Jacksonville wish they were in the same shoes as Kansas City right now, for example.
Well, they certainly wish they were in the same place as Kansas City, in that they wish they had Patrick Mahomes right now. But It is interesting. I always had written off the idea that a rookie quarterback would sort of poke the starter into playing better, but you're right. This is two examples where it has, in fact, seemed to work. So perhaps there is something to that. Then again, it's not, there haven't really been reports saying that Lamar Jackson is ready to take over. So Flacco, based on Lamar Jackson's play, I don't know if Flacco should really be that worried. Also, they have got to stop it with this messing around with Lamar Jackson as a wide receiver. I don't see how that is going to help him at all, and it's not helping their offense in the least.
Right. If it was helping their offense, I'd make more of an argument for you here, but they just haven't done a whole lot with him on the field yet. I don't hate the idea.
It's like we're going to just break the rhythm of everything and bring in Lamar to play one play, and then what's the point of that?
Right. All right, let's get into the second most important game of the week. Who do we have in that one?
Well, the second most important game of the week is Tampa Bay at Chicago, or what I call the Who is for Real Bowl. Which of these teams is actually for real? When Tampa Bay is on offense, it's an unstoppable force versus an immovable object. The number one defense of DVOA, which is the Chicago Bears, versus Tampa Bay, which has the number 5 offense. When Chicago is on offense, it's the stoppable force versus the movable object, which is the Chicago offense being number 27 and the Tampa Bay defense number 29.
Yeah, it'll be definitely fascinating on both sides of the ball there. And the thing that I'm definitely looking forward to in this one is Jameis Winston versus Ryan Fitzpatrick. It looks like Fitz is going to be the starter. Josh Hermsmeyer put out an excellent article earlier in the week on 538, kind of making his case for Winston being the better quarterback over the course of his career. And so Winston should play this week. What was your take on that article and on this situation?
I agree with Josh wholeheartedly. I think Winston has been better through his career. I think you can't assume, based on 2 or 3 games that Fitzpatrick is better right now. I think Winston is a bit of an underrated quarterback because he's excellent at getting first downs. We ran a table in the Football Outsiders Almanac. The most first downs per attempt since 2001. And this is incredible. Jameis Winston is second since 2001 in first downs per pass attempt behind Peyton Manning. He's excellent at getting the ball downfield. He throws long passes. And I realized that Fitzpatrick also excels at the deep pass, but Winston is better at the medium pass, the 15 to 20 yard, 25 yard pass, not the 40-yard bomb. And those 15 to 20 yard passes are a lot more trustworthy over the long term.
So I've actually got some really interesting research about just that fact. Bryce Rossler, one of our video scouts, we're calling him the new Keegan. He came in and did some excellent research on these two guys and compared how the charting data bears out the difference between them, not necessarily trying to make a case for one or the other, but trying to really explore what the differences are. So let's take a little tour around that. And I'll give you a spoiler alert. My take is I would start Fitzpatrick this week. I would still plan on Winston being my long-term guy. As I agree with Josh's point that Winston is probably, if I had to choose one of them to cut tomorrow, I'd rather keep Winston around. We're talking on-field only, of course. But for this week, with the way that they've been playing, with the way that he's been playing, I don't see any way you can look his teammates in the eye and take Fitzpatrick off.
No, I agree with that. I absolutely agree with that. There's a difference between what you would do in a vacuum and what you do when you have to consider locker room chemistry.
For sure. So let's get through some of this research. So first of all, one thing, big score for Winston on this one. In terms of box defenders, Winston faces 37% of the time 6 men in the box. It's just 27% of the time for Fitzpatrick seeing 6 men in the box. And in contrast, Winston faces 8 men in the box just 16% of the time, and Fitzpatrick faces 6 men in the box 24% of the time. So bottom line is that Tampa was confronted with 6-man boxes 9% more often with Winston at the helm, and 8-man boxes 10% more often when Fitzpatrick was under center. That's a big advantage for Winston. That tells me something about how the defenses are playing these guys and who is scaring them, so that they can really put their resources towards the run game versus the pass game.
That's interesting because you would think that Fitzpatrick is so good at those deep bombs that they would play fewer men in the box, but it's actually the opposite.
So let's look at the second big difference between them that Bryce found. So, in terms of man or zone coverage, Winston faces man 6% more of the time than he faces zone. And with Fitzpatrick faces zone 14% more of the time than he faces man. So we see a huge difference. And the difference, by the way, is really on the Fitzpatrick end. Teams tend to play zone much more frequently against Fitzpatrick. This is the last 2 years, by the way. They play zone much more frequently against Fitzpatrick than they do against Winston. And this is rational, it turns out. For once, we're talking about rational coaches. Fitzpatrick was successful more often than not against man. His 3 best positive play percentages are against man schemes. And Winston played his best against cover 2 and cover 3. So we're seeing a rational tendency to play Fitzpatrick with more zone, with Winston with more man. And it matches up with where they excel in terms of their performance.
It makes you wonder, which do you want to have against Chicago, right? Is Chicago more of a team that plays man or more of a team that plays zone? And it turns out they're about at the NFL average. Last year, based on the SIS data, Chicago was in man coverage 57% of the time, which was roughly average. So I guess either way, who you play this week doesn't matter as far as whether you want to play Winston or Fitzpatrick.
Right, and I'm looking at it right now. The Bears have faced 99 attempts so far this season in pass defense, and the Bears, 53 of those, just like you're saying, 53 of those man. So a slight lean towards man for the Bears this year, but pretty even as we've seen in the past.
I will say that you see the box. We're talking about the boxes with Ryan Fitzpatrick. I think you see that in the Tampa Bay running stats, because Tampa Bay is second in pass DVOA and dead last in run DVOA, which is kind of what you would expect if Peyton Barber had to face 8-man boxes all the time.
Right. It makes sense. It goes along with what we were saying about the defense dictating based on their boxes, kind of in support of that theory. And Bryce had a funny theory. He said, maybe teams just forget and have this cycle of forgetting about Fitzpatrick being kind of good. And so they play him like he's a terrible quarterback. He comes, lights them up for a few games, and then the cycle repeats itself, and he goes back to just being Ryan Fitzpatrick when they play him more straight up. I thought it was a funny way to look at it.
It sounds like teams are playing it that way, and they're basically challenging Fitzpatrick to beat them with bombs, and he just managed to do it the first couple of games. And then the third game, he finally throws some picks.
So here's the craziest one, the throw depth frequency, as you've been alluding to. So Winston throws 5 yards or fewer downfield 34% of the time. Fitzpatrick, 44% of the time. Fitzpatrick's much more likely to throw a pass less than 5 yards down the field. And at every depth above that, Winston throws deep more often. 11 to 20 yards, Winston's at 32%, Fitzpatrick at 28. 20 plus yards, Winston's at 13%, Fitzpatrick's at 10. So Winston is actually the one who's more inclined to attack downfield. However, Fitzpatrick plays better when he sets his sights more than 10 yards down the line of scrimmage. So you mentioned that 11 to 20 yard range before, or something along those lines. On 11 to 20 yards downfield, Fitzpatrick averages 51 expected points added per 100 plays, whereas Winston adds 37 expected points per 100 plays. Big advantage for Fitzpatrick there, even though that's a stat we're not used to dealing kind of with. In terms of 20 or more yards downfield, Fitzpatrick has a 35% successful play percentage and Winston just 24%. That said, the expected points added comes out kind of evenly somehow in terms of the total per play. But you see Fitzpatrick completing those passes much more often than Winston is. So it gives some really interesting context to kind of what we're seeing there and why we're having this downfield effectiveness by Ryan Fitzpatrick.
It's interesting. It's a little bit different than I would have expected Winston to be better at the medium range throws and Fitzpatrick at the deep ones.
Right. Right there with you. And now finally, the last part of this research, we looked at the individual coverage schemes. And the thing that really stands out is that Fitzpatrick has faced cover 4 or quarters coverage about twice as often as the NFL average, over twice as often as the NFL average. And he's logged a whopping 81 expected points per 100 passes against the cover 4. So he is absolutely crushing the cover 4. And for whatever reason, I talked about teams playing him rationally before. They are not in terms of the amount that they're playing cover 4 against him. And he's absolutely been eating them alive. So I'd look for that to come back down to earth. Hopefully the teams that are playing him start waking up and realizing that that's not the best strategy in the world. And then hopefully also they start easing up on the box defenders and playing him a little bit more like they play Jameis Winston, to be honest. When that happens, that's when I think we'll see them make the change. We go back to Jameis Winston being the starter and everything being normal. The Fitzmagic passes.
Yeah, I mean, look, the thing about Fitzmagic is we've seen this before. I ran a thing this week of the best offensive starts since 1989 because the Chiefs are on that list, and so are the 2011 Buffalo Bills, which of all the teams on this list are the one that didn't keep that offensive start going, and that was Ryan's Fitzmagic playing out of his gourd for 3 weeks and then going back to being what he's always been, which is an above average backup and a below average starter. And that's what he is. And that's what he's going to be in the long term.
It's like damn Yankees. It's got to wear off at some point.
Yeah. I'll tell you the other part about this game is the flip of it, which is when Chicago is on offense. I think we have to be really kind of disappointed in Mitchell Trubisky so far. Mitchell Trubisky is 28th in passing DVOA. If you want to use ESPN's QBR, he's 25th. He's definitely holding back the Chicago offense. The Chicago offense is actually 11th running the ball. So the problem is not the run game. It's not Jordan Howard. It's the pass game. And this, Matt Nagy was supposed to bring in a hot scheme and fix it. But I've seen a couple of different people doing film study on the internets showing how Trubisky is not seeing things and leaving plays on the field. And I do think that it's been a year and a quarter, and we're not seeing development yet from this guy.
Yeah, we thought they were going to have a more kind of exciting, interesting offense with the system that they brought in there this year, but we're not seeing a ton of air yards in what they're doing. They're in the bottom five. Bottom five teams in air yards this year are the Cowboys, the Bears, the Bills, the Cardinals, and the Titans. No big surprise there. These are teams that have really struggled to pass the ball this year, haven't had answers at that position. And unfortunately, like you're saying, Mitchell is right in that mix.
Right, but a lot of them, like the Cowboys, the problem is the receivers. With Chicago, with Allen Robinson there and Taylor Gabriel and the kid Miller, the problem is not the receivers. It's the quarterback that's the problem right now.
We'll see if it starts as the season goes on, if he can start to develop into a rhythm, or if it looks like that the Bears will have everything else falling into place except for that position, because they might be shaping up to look like another one of these Jacksonville, Tennessee type teams if they're not careful.
Absolutely.
All right, let's get into the final most important game of the week, and we've been dying to talk about this one. Which one is it?
I feel like Sal Paolantonio. This is the most important game of the week because I'll be there. It's Miami at New England. And now these odds are going to sound a little crazy because we need to talk a little bit about playoff odds here. We have Miami's playoff odds at 92% if they win this game, 74% with a loss. We have New England at 53% with a win, 25% with a loss. Now, what that means is that even if New England wins this game, we still would have Miami with higher playoff odds because of the one-game lead they would still have on New England in the division. Now, this gets to the question of whether we may be overestimating the importance of how well Miami has played this year in the ratings that we use to do the playoff odds. It's interesting because if you look and you compare our playoff odds to what they have at Vegas right now, if you look at Miami, it would look like we're really overestimating the importance of how well they've played this year compared to the past, compared to Vegas. If you look at Kansas City, then we're not overestimating how well the teams are playing this year compared to the past. Vegas certainly is taking Kansas City's great start more seriously than Miami's great start, even though the two teams are actually relatively equivalent in DVOA so far this year. Miami's just been much more of a balanced team. Miami is top 8 in all 3 areas of the game, whereas Kansas City is all offense and special teams with the worst defense in the league.
Right. I still can't believe what you're saying, but it goes back to the fact that Miami would be 4-0 with the win. So I get how good they'd look. 3-1 with the loss, and as you know, I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid on what they've done quite yet there. Let's get into New England though, and what we saw from them in their last game, which was absolutely anemic passing offense. It appeared that defensively, we just saw a commitment to kind of double cover Gronk, get him out of the game. and beg somebody else to beat him. And there was nobody else that could win on the outside there for Tom Brady.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see in this game 2 questions. 1, does Josh Gordon play, and what are they getting out of him? 2, who does Xavier Howard cover? Because Xavier Howard has been phenomenal so far this year. Miami is number 1 in the league so far against number 1 receivers. But who's the number 1 wide receiver for the Patriots, right? Do you use him on Chris Hogan? Do you use him on Josh Gordon? Or do you use him on Gronk because Gronk is effectively really their number 1 receiver? I think that's a really interesting strategic game there for Miami. Where do they use their strengths? But the thing is, it's funny. Part of the problem for the Patriots has been slow linebackers. And therefore, you can run crossing routes in front of them and stuff to running backs. But that's also a problem with Miami's defense, the slow linebackers like Kiko Alonso. You could run crossing routes in front of them and stuff to running backs. So the defenses seem to actually might have the similar weakness, although it's been a much bigger weakness for the Patriots so far this year.
So what's been kind of a little bit of an unexpected strength for the Dolphins has been their secondary. And you mentioned Xavier Howard, absolutely ridiculous. 13 targets, 15% completions against, 4.7 yards per attempt against, and a QB rating against of just 7. He's been outstanding. There's no doubt about it. Also, some of the safeties on this team are really good. Rashad Jones is excellent. He's back into full health, looking good. TJ McDonald has played well early in the season. But it's been Minkah Fitzpatrick that I think has been a real difference maker. And I'm looking forward to seeing him against Gronk in this game. We'll probably see some double teams with the amount of success that we saw against that in the past week. But Minkah, with his size and his ability to run with Gronk, I think that's the matchup that we'll see.
Yeah, they had 2 big plays to Jordy Nelson in the Raiders game where the safety went the wrong way. I don't think it was Minkah Fitzpatrick. I think it was one of the other safeties. And Rashad Jones did not play in that game. They can't do that against Gronk. But other than that, that defense clamped down on that Raiders passing game. As long as they can avoid those couple of big blown coverages, that Miami defense is playing really well right now.
Right, and the guys that we're mentioning, it's reflected in the advanced stats. Minkah being credited with 10 points saved so far this year to lead the Dolphins defense. Rashad Jones, 8 points saved, and Xavier Howard, another 7, which reflects not just the plays they make on the ball, but also the suppression of pass attempts coming in their direction. So really nice play by the secondary so far.
Yeah, the Miami is definitely, I think, the most surprising team in the league so far. They just haven't gotten as much of people's attention because the surprise has not been offense. It's been much more of an all-around game and much more of a defensive performance for them. And I realize people are writing off the teams that they've played. But based on our Dave ratings, as much as they've played an easy schedule so far, the Rams have played an even easier schedule so far, and nobody is writing them off. So I think that people may be sort of overestimating the amount that schedule has mattered to how well Miami has played so far this season.
You mentioned earlier, week 1 was really weird. It almost shouldn't count as a game, and we should almost just be looking at these last 2 weeks.
It is really weird.
They've played really weak schedule. So it's tough to say.
They've had better ratings in week 2 and 3 than week 1, though. I will say, as far as DVOA goes, week 1 is not what's built their resume. It's week 2 and 3. Their week 3 rating is bigger than what the actual score of the game was because on defense, it was really just 2 big plays that they gave up. Otherwise, that defense clamped down all game.
Right. The defense has been good. I count me as a non-believer in the Dolphins. I grew up a Dolphins fan, so it pains me to say it, but count me in the crew with, I know you're friends with the Levitard guys, and I was listening to them a little bit earlier this week. I think that this is one of those fake Miami Dolphins starts. They've been losing this game for a long time. It's hard to picture them winning it.
This game means a lot. Because the fact is that if the Patriots win this game, then we can say, okay, maybe Miami's early play was a bit of a fluke. Okay, it's another one of those 2-2 Patriots starts where September doesn't mean that much. We're all going to go on with life as we are used to living.
Same reason why you predicted Pittsburgh to win on Monday night.
Yep. If Miami wins this game, oh my God, is everything different than expected. Now Miami's got a 2 or 3 game lead in the division. It might only be 2 because it's possible that the Patriots won't even be in second place if they lose this game. And now we're talking about the Patriots as a below average team, definitely after 4 weeks. And we're talking about Miami as a surprising one of the top teams in the league after 4 weeks. So this is actually, I think this is a hugely important game. Maybe not as much for playoff odds as for just how we see the league and how we see these teams and sort of, how much we believe that this season is different than the seasons that came before them. So it's really intriguing to see what the outcome is. I have to say that I'm expecting a Patriots win, but I'm expecting a close Patriots win. I think Miami has a really good chance to cover, in which case I think we come out of it saying maybe Miami's better than you might give them credit for, but also it's just another Patriots 2-2 start.
Yep, I'm on the same page with you there. If they happen to lose, then I'll start to look at the conspiracy theories. If with all the Belichick, Brady, Kraft drama, and now the Gronk trade rumor, if they're intentionally tanking.
I hate to tell you this. I think the biggest conspiracy theory with the Patriots is Dante Hightower doesn't have it anymore.
Ooh, there's an interesting one.
I think that's a bigger reason for their struggles early on than anything having to do with Guerrero or the disagreements between Brady and Belichick. The problem is, the offense is a problem, but, Edelman will come back. I think the bigger issue is the defense. We were expecting to get a lot back from Dante Hightower, and it just hasn't happened. And now they've lost their fastest linebacker, the rookie Bentley. He's gone on IR. I think speed on defense is a bigger culprit.
Yeah, they might just be lacking a lot of good players. Who knows? And who knows what if there is something, if there's a long game here for Belichick in the way that he's playing this, I'm dying to see what it is.
Yeah, I don't think there's a long game. I think he tried to build the best team he could this year, and it's possible that it just isn't that good a team. For one thing, on the other side of the ball, people talk about they didn't go out and get receivers for Brady, but they did go out and get receivers for Brady. It's just they all got hurt.
Not on the field, right?
Like they had too many receivers at one point, and then they just all kept going down one by one. Britt got hurt, and
they had so many.
Mitchell got hurt, and Matthews got hurt, and Eric Decker retired. Yeah. That's right. Like they got all these receivers, and then they all got hurt. Decker didn't have much left, but I don't think that they were deliberately not giving Brady receivers. I think that those guys just got hurt. The problem is that the linebackers, I think a lot of things were based on the idea that Hightower was going to be back at the level that he played at a year or two ago. They certainly tried to add to the pass rush with Claiborne. I think they felt good already about their secondary, and it's all just imploded so far.
All right, well, it'll be a fascinating game this weekend, and we'll all be watching. On that note, we will sign off. Aaron, do you want to ride us out?
I'm just looking forward to a good week 4 and hopefully a more exciting Baltimore-Pittsburgh game than usual. Those games are always important, but they often tend to be boring. I think this one's going to be a little less boring and a little more exciting.
Please like us, rate us, and we'll talk to you next week.